Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the NMP Conservative Media Network. And we are filming at a very special event for Russ Taub for Congress. And a very special guest has decided to come and sit down with us and talk about a very serious problem. His name is Charles Jacobs from the Americans for Peace and Tolerance. He's the creator of the J Street Challenge video that's been out there. Mr. Jacobs, thank you for taking your time. I know you're trying to have some fun here tonight, so I appreciate this. One of the topic that I want to discuss here, very, very serious. Obviously, the refugee problem, not only here in the United States, but throughout all of Europe. It doesn't seem anybody's vetting these people. We know what happened in Paris last year. We had Belgium just a few days ago. Already ISIS has said that they've got 400 people in Europe. This is not a problem that's going away or being diminished, and it doesn't seem like either the Europeans or the Americans are doing anything to try to prevent it or even stop it. At least that's what it seems like to me. You have some insight on this you want to share with us.
Yeah, well, look, we are a country of immigrants. Mm-hmm. We're people with heart. We're crushed when we see little Syrian boys drowning in the ocean. These are terrible things, but and we want immigrants here who will bolster our way of life and not challenge it. And unfortunately, the Syrians come from a culture that is diametrically opposed to ours. And what we've discovered is that their school curricula is filled with anti-Jewish and anti-Christian, anti-Western and anti-American things. So by the time a Syrian boy or girl is 9 or 10 years old, he
hates Jews and Americans.
He hates Jews and Americans and Christians. So there's no vetting for that. Nobody, you can't get into a freshman composition course in college without going through a series of sensitivity trainings about gays and women and black in the United States, right? And yet no one has even brought up the issue of Syrian anti-Semitism.
Now, is part of that, I know that when Saddam Hussein was in power and the Americans went in, one of the things they discovered was curriculums and books that were completely written, almost like the same thing they have in North Korea. It's all propagandized. Is that because of Assad, or is that Islam that's doing that? Which is
Well, it's kind of both. I mean, there's a radicalized Islam. Mm-hmm. I know there's a debate whether it's the real Islam or the radicalized Islam. I don't want to get into that debate. I just know that people use Quranic texts to justify the slaughter and killing of Jews and Christians and infidels in general. And by the way, the Syrians who would come here, if we allow them to come here, would be joining lots and lots of Muslims who are already radicalized here. We're sitting in Boston with the Boston Marathon bombing, and we have in Boston the largest mosque on the eastern seaboard, which was funded by Saudi Arabia, the Islamic Society of Boston, which has in itself a curriculum that radicalizes young Muslim kids. And the problem here is the radicalization of the historically moderate Muslim community. That's ongoing. Nobody wants to touch it. It's a taboo subject. If you bring it up, you're an Islamophobic, bigot, racist, bad person. But the fact of the matter is that there are 12 or 13 people connected to this mosque in Boston who are either in jail, on the run from federal authorities, or dead, like the Tsarnaev.
There's something like 1,000 mosques, 1,000 mosques just in the country alone, according to FBI statistics. 1,000 in the country.
Well, according to congressional testimony, there are 80% or more, 80% have been are in the control of radicals. The people who control the mosque in Boston are called the Muslim American Society. They run the day-to-day operations. And the federal authorities have called them an overt arm of Hamas, of the Muslim Brotherhood. They're all linked together. And it's a terrible, terrible thing, because what they're doing is they're poisoning the minds of these young Muslims who otherwise would be fine just like every other young person. But they're poisoning their minds in a way that makes them terrible, threats to us and to themselves. I mean, they're destroying the souls of these innocent people. So, and in America, it's very difficult to talk about this. We sat down with the Boston Globe. We know this because we were sued by the mosque.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's a long story. It's a very famous case. We were sued by the mosque. They said we defamed them when we pointed out who was on their board of trustees, a very famous Muslim preacher named Qaradawi, the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who every week speaks to tens and tens and hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the Middle East, telling them why every Jew in the world has to be killed, why America has to be destroyed, why there has to be a caliphate. And this is a guy on the board of trustees on the largest mosque in the Eastern Seaboard in Roxbury, Boston. So when we said things like this, they sued us, and we got the discovery materials. We were able to get from them their internal documents.
I don't think they expected that, the
expect
discovery aspect of our legal system.
And so we,
Good for you.
yeah, and so you can see on our website, peaceandtolerance.org, you can see films about this. And it's a very dangerous situation. We sat down with the Boston Globe, and we showed them documents. Here's a check to the mosque from very, very bad people. Here's a check to the mosque from very bad people, and vice versa, from the mosque from very bad people. Here's on their website, how to beat your wife. And the Boston Globe, of course, I shouldn't say of course, but...
No, go ahead.
Well,
Let me guess, they tried to somehow make this seem, well, this is their culture. And
No, they
they
ignored us.
They just ignored
They ignored us. So while they did this, everybody saw the movie Spotlight. So while they did a very good job of investigating the terrible things with the priests and the kids and all of that in Boston, they got a big award for that. When we brought them things that actually are much more dangerous, they punted. So.
Islam, from my education, mostly also from just researching it ever since I started doing my show some years ago, it's not a religion, it's more of a cult, but it's also a way of life. It's systemic throughout the entire culture. I don't know, you could be Arab, Indonesian, but it's a way of life. Unlike Judaism or even Christianity, where it's more of a personal, well, maybe Judaism and to a certain degree, some sects of Christianity is a way of life. But the difference is you don't see Israelis flying planes into buildings. You don't see Christians blowing up airports. How do we bridge that gap between Islam, the cult, and trying to understand it either as a cult or, if we want to keep using the word religion, and try to make that reconcile? How do we bridge that gap between I want to use the word good Muslims, that's probably not a proper word to use, I think you know what I'm trying to say, as opposed to radical Muslims? How do we bridge that gap? How do we bring the good Muslims to overtake the radical Muslims?
Well, I think it's very complicated. It's very complicated. Islam has not had a reformation like Judaism and Christianity have had reformations, so that not every word in the Bible has to be literal. It can be metaphorized. It can be seen in different ways, interpreted in different ways.
And we see it also as historical context.
Yeah.
I mean, there was obviously stoning and stuff in the Old Testament.
But no
Who
more.
in their right mind would stone anybody today? Right. You see what I'm saying?
That's right. That's right. The problem is that Islam has been radicalized and it's been politicized. So Islam is not just prayer, but it's an economic system, it's a political system.
And that's what I meant by the question.
It's a full life system. And the people who are now seem to be in control of at least the thriving aspects of it are the most radical. And what we have to do is to look for and hope and pray for the moderates to arise, and they are. There are some. We work with moderate Muslims, Zuhdi Jasser, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who has created a reform Muslim movement, who challenges CARE, who challenges the Muslim Brotherhood. The bravest people in the world are these people. And if the media would only speak to them, instead of the ones who pretend to be moderate but really aren't, then we'd be in a lot better.
And my next question was going to be, why hasn't the media exposed these Muslims who want to try to work and bring everybody together in the community? What do you have?
Well, they're starting to. They're starting to. I see Zuhdi Jasser on CNN and on local radio, and people should, look for his name, Jasser, Jasser. But the fact of the matter is that all of the Muslims who are moderate in America, most of them are terrified, frightened. Many of them come to us and
because they'll kill them too if they.
They'll kill them or
their families.
Their families back home where they're much more
much more vulnerable.
And how many people are heroes? Even amongst ourselves, how many people are heroes? They have to be heroic. What Zuhdi Jasser is doing, he's risking his life every day.
Sure.
So I think there's a big divide in the anti-jihad movement, which we're all part of, the anti-jihad movement. There's a divide between those who say it's Islam and those who say it's radical Islam. And I belong to the second group. That I think that there can be, it's not impossible to have a reform Muslim movement, and we have to hope for that's true. Meanwhile, we all have to join together against the jihadists, and we have to yell and scream at our politicians who won't say that it's radical Islamic terrorism.
And I hadn't thought of what you just said, that the Reformation, you're right, historically, Judaism, Christianity split into all the different sects. The Catholic thought that was part of the Reformation. You're right, Islam still has not had
an enlightenment.
Right,
and
exactly.
Reformation. There's no reform movement it's starting, and there are some little elements of it, and we have to pray for it. There's
Right.
nothing we can do to make it happen, because it
Right.
has to come from inside.
Perhaps they have to go through this crucible. They have to have this horrible thing happen in their religion in order for a reformation to happen to them.
I just hope it happens quick.
And quickly, I'll let you go in about 2 seconds. Iran and the bomb, they're hell-bent on it. They talk about destroying Israel.
Well, Israel would be the first, but then America would be second, then
Exactly.
Europe would be second, or Russia would be second. But I mean, if they've got long-range missiles and they've got atomic weaponry, we're not totally protected either.
Sure, certainly. Mr. Jacobs, I want to thank you so much for this time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Charles Jacobs, folks.